here's the deal. Y'all got out-coached again. You've gotten out-coached every year for how many years now? You can attribute it to an imaginary curse that you believe is hanging over the Nebraska program. And then you say, it's easy for you to say. You're part of the luckiest fan base out there. Well, again, you want to call it luck and call it curse?
Really the lucky fan base, though?
Well, he's talking about all the close games that Iowa wins. But, Mark, typically, can we agree that if you – and this is – I don't care who the head coach is. I've said this a million times. If you are known for losing close games, if that's become a trend for you and that's become your MO, you probably have some issues with culture, coaching, leadership, the little things. Whereas if you're winning close games, you probably have strong culture and coaching and leadership and attention to detail.
I remember that one game, though. It was Nebraska versus Michigan 2 years ago. And Nebraska had a great drive going down the field, and it looked like they were going to win the game. And then I think it was Martinez. He just fumbled the ball. Like, that's not Scott Frost, though. Scott Frost made a lot of sense.
But Jeffrey, that's my point.
Players
you
making
cannot
mistakes.
look at individual games. You cannot do that when it's a trend. When it is a cultural over and over and over and over, you're losing the same way. You're basically losing the same way in different ways, if it makes sense.
But how do you lose by one score to Ohio State? Give it all that you have, because if it's a culture problem, you would think that they would just throw in the towel, say we're done, we're not going to try, we're going to lose, we don't care. And
Because I think.
But then you go out there and you lose to teams that you're better than by the exact same score.
I'll tell you why. A couple of years ago, I believe it was Steve Dace talked about this, Mark, and it might have been on your show. Might have been on the show we did together with Steve. But he talked about Nebraska in, I want to say 2021. I could be a year off. But he was looking at the data from the previous year. And you probably remember this conversation because you got that type of a memory. And he was talking about how the numbers actually indicate that Nebraska was really good in the trenches. Like, they were winning the battle up front more often than not.
Yeah.
The numbers indicated that more often than not, they were right there with everybody they played. And the only way you lose games when you're that solid up front is, again, is things like fumbling the football, making a stupid throw into double coverage at a dumb time, blowing a red zone opportunity at the end of the first half. Well, it is. Of course, it's coaching. Absolutely, it's coaching.
It's not the coach.
Absolutely,
it's coaching. Fumbles the football.
That's the stupid. Okay, with all due respect, Jeffrey. Can I just say something? With all due respect to you, Jeffrey, that's the stupidest thing you've ever said. Because when you have a million different players making similar stupid mistakes over and over again, that comes down to whoever's either recruiting the coaches, recruiting the players, developing the players, coaching the players during the game. You can't keep. You sound like Kirk Ferentz blaming players for a consistent lack of development and performance.
Corey, wait. That's not what I'm doing. I'm saying that it's not Scott Frost's fault when Adrian Martinez fumbles the football. What is his fault is when you have the center hiking the ball to Adrian Martinez and the ball goes 2 feet over 10 feet over his head several games in a row, and you don't replace the guy. That is Scott.
But you're looking at that. You're looking at that, Jeffrey, from a You are looking at that from a micro standpoint. You have to look at this from a macro standpoint. All these things that occur are, and I'm telling you, Coach Patterson, who's a seasoned coach, would say the same thing. All of these come down to how these guys are being coached behind the scenes, not just during the game, how they're being brought up in spring, during the summer, during fall camp. If a guy is fumbling, then maybe there's something you didn't emphasize well enough throughout the offseason, like maybe ball security. Or perhaps you didn't,
but
put
a
guy in the doghouse.
If you're a football player and you're Adrian Martinez and you're talented and you want
why
to
do you think they practice ball? But Jeffrey,
would he not be able to figure out how to, if he fumbles several times?
Why do you think they practice ball security? Because it has to be practiced. It's not just something that you just pick up on. Mark?
And Minnesota Minnesota's a better disciplined team too. You can tell that they're a better coach team because they were basically more.
They are a better coach team. Yeah, absolutely. They're as well. I shouldn't say we don't know that we don't know that's going to be the case moving forward. Tonight, Matt Rule was outcoached by PJ Fleck.
Yeah, and I mean, right when you were talking about basically mistakes that were made, Minnesota made some big mistakes too. Roughing the punter on that one play was that kid didn't see special teams after that. That kid roughed the kicker because that was you have to get yourself away from the punter on that. But Nebraska made some bad mistakes, big bad mistakes.
Felipe Garcia keeps asking in chat if I played football. No, I have not played football. I don't think it looks like I've played football. I mean, the thing is, Mark hasn't said anything, so, I don't know, if what I said was completely insane or not. I just said that sometimes it's not the coach's fault. That's what I said. I said some of the games that Nebraska lost were not Scott Frost's fault. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that some of them were, some of them were. To say that every game they lost was his fault is incorrect. To say that every game wasn't his fault and it was bad luck is false. It's somewhere in the middle. That's what I was trying to say.
Well, it's certainly his responsibility.
Yeah.
We know that it's his
and it's more his responsibility. It's more Matt Rule's responsibility now that he's at Nebraska than it was when he was at Carolina. This is college football we're talking about. All right. And there's even more of an onus in high school ball and as you go down the ladder. So at some point I have a hard time blaming college athletes. I'll give you an example. 2000 was it 16? 2014 Insight Bowl, Iowa, Tennessee, one of the stupidest plays I've ever seen from any player at any level. Jonathan Parker catches the ball at the 5-yard line. You remember what he did on a kickoff return, Mark?
No.
He threw the ball back out tried to throw the ball back in bounds as he's falling out of bounds. He threw it back in bounds.
I remember that now.
Right? Bonehead play. Now, is that reflective of a trend and a culture at Iowa? No. Not reflective at all of something you see from an Iowa guy.
I was saying that some games were like that. That's what I was saying. You're talking about a trend.
Let me come around to it.
Set because there was a lot of mistakes by Scott Frost and the players. It went hand in hand, but some of the mistakes weren't Frost's fault. Some of them weren't the players' fault. It's not correlative all the way.
What I'm saying is with Iowa, that one bonehead situation is not indicative. That's not consistent with Iowa, the Iowa culture and the Iowa way. What we saw tonight, stupid throws at stupid times, dumb penalties, the collapse at the end of the first half, screwing yourself in the red zone, all those things. Maybe this is just a outlier of the Matt Rule era and kind of a bump. But I'm just saying, if this were a Scott Frost coach team, I'd look at this and I'd say we have the same problem. So I'm not going to blame Jeff Sims just got there when the same thing was happening with Casey Thompson, the same thing was happening with Tommy Armstrong or whoever. Tommy Armstrong went with Scott Frost, but you get my point. All these different players, if they're all making dumb decisions, even if they're all individually dumb, what's the common denominator? Players or coaches?
Well, to defend Rule to a certain extent, when you take over a program and you inherit 80 to 90% of the players, and all they know is how to lose and make boneheaded plays at the worst times, then you've got to coach that out of them, and maybe he's in the process of doing that effectively.
Right. I agree, and I'm high on Matt Rule. I think he's going to get it done there. I just. Part of me was disappointed to see that. Part of me just can't stand Nebraska in general. But you and I have different perspectives on it, Jeffrey, because what?
We watched a season opening game out of Nebraska against the Big Ten Western Division foe for the third consecutive year, and all were 1-score losses, and were all very winnable games in which there were botched plays in the final minutes.
Now, we'll say this, that there's no question Nebraska looked good defensively most of the night.
Yeah.
And Dave, just so you're
play awful on offense. That's the other thing.
Well, let me tell you something, Dave. What I'd be concerned with right now, Dave, is the consistency in the run game, because if Minnesota's not able to run the football, I don't know what that offense looks like, especially without Chris Ottman-Bell. So I didn't think Calic Madison.
Does anyone know when he's supposed to be back? I thought he was supposed to be back this year. I mean, he was on the sidelines. He was dressed. He just did not play.
He seems to be very, very injury ridden.
Yeah, that is true.
Yep.
Hey Corey, can I ask you one more question though? I mean,
sure.
You talk about Scott Frost at UCF. I know it's a low level, small team, all that kind of stuff. You know, they're in the Big 12 now, but he was at UCF and they won and they won and they won. They won games. And granted, UCF, I mean, but it was a 1-11 team. He turned around, all that kind of stuff. Why was he able to coach there and win? But he goes to Nebraska's alma mater, where you think he would do everything in his power to turn the program around, be the one to do it, because it's the team that he played for in the 90s under Tom Osborne. He's the quarterback. He was great. You think he'd want to go to Nebraska and win, and yet he just was inept. And yet at UCF, he wasn't inept. How was that possible?
There's no way. There's no way for me to know the answer to that question.
Because for me, like if I was at UCF, I was the coach, and I went back to my alma mater, Nebraska, to coach, I would be doing everything I possibly could.
Pressure coaching.
I mean, there is such a thing as pressure. There's also a situation maybe he was too comfortable. There's also the family dynamic, and that there's a rumor out there that he's cheating on his wife. I can tell you first-hand accounts from people that I know. I can tell you first-hand accounts from people I know that are associated with Iowa recruiting, players that Iowa recruited. Stories that you've probably heard of because they've circulated online that are legitimate, of how he acted and some of his behavior on recruiting visits and not showing up to kids' homes. I don't know why. I have no idea why that situation failed and why his whole tenure was a disaster.
Because at UCF, I mean, they were fantastic, and then you go to Nebraska and he just suddenly is terrible. It's completely broken. It makes absolutely no sense.
If anyone can relate to having issues in your home or in relationships, whether they are manufactured or your fault, or they are maybe medical issues that you can't control, whatever the issue, the origin of the issue, and based on what Corey had to say, and I've heard the same things, those would obviously be issues that he is responsible for, then they are going to have a devastating effect for most people. There are very rare people that can compartmentalize to that degree, that are that good, that inhuman in a way to be able to compartmentalize. But it's usually going to bleed into your professionalism and into a sport and into a job where you're responsible for 105 players plus coaching staff, plus you're responsible for 140, 150 people, and there's a lot of attention to detail involved in coaches. That's one of the very utmost items on the list of great coaches that they cite: attention to detail. And he obviously lost that ability. I'm going to say that coaching at UCF and coaching at Nebraska, in that sense, there shouldn't be much difference there, other than him having a larger buffer of probably a larger talent gap at UCF versus the rest of the American Conference than stepping into the Big Ten, and where you need to be completely on point. And if you're not, then even if you've got a fairly talented team that is roughly 25th in the nation in recruiting rankings every year, where you should be able to compete better than that, you should be right there with Iowa and Wisconsin and Minnesota. But you're not, because you're losing games in the fourth quarter because your players are not poised and they're not disciplined.
Well, another example, you talk about Jimbo Fisher. And granted, he took over a great situation at Florida State, and it continued into success. He won a title, all that stuff. But he goes to Texas A&M, and he's got talent, but there's off the field problems, and their seasons have been not that great. And last year they went 5-7, and his players went out there and they lost to Appalachian State. They lost that game, but then they go out there and beat LSU by 2 scores. They hung with Bama. That's messed up. So you talk about, Jimbo Fisher being a guy that maybe some of his players have some problem, maybe off the field, maybe, you talk about him, maybe he's not doing the attention to detail, all the stuff you guys are talking about that I wouldn't know because I didn't play football. You talk about then Kirby Smart, Georgia, and understanding he maybe runs it better than Jimbo. I don't know because, again, I'm not there. But then you talk about some of their players have had off-the-field stuff as well, but it's not affecting their play. Whereas at A&M, it is. Is that Jimbo's fault? Is it Kirby, doing a better job getting – I don't know. It's all subjective, objective, again, whatever the word Mark likes better. I forgot which one is better. But you know what I'm saying.
Am I looking at – is this Jackson wearing a – am I seeing – I can't see the screen. Who are
Wisconsin?
We've got Jackson. We've got Ben. They've been waiting patiently for a long, long time. So we will allow Ben to take his shot here, and then Jackson.
Oh, one thing I wanted to say is I actually like Jeffrey's point that he was making earlier as far as Scott Frost, and what I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% like on. I'm kind of in between Corey and Jeffrey, but I also look at I don't think the head coach, I mean, they're ultimately responsible, but I don't think they're the only contributing factor to a culture of a football team. And I'm going to use Michigan.
I've never, I never claimed that that he was the only factor. Okay. I've never claimed that. But I said in general,
I don't know who else here.
That's what it kind of felt like.
I don't know who else here is a father, but my two kids were extremely easy to raise. They were phenomenal. So I'm going to stop bragging on them, but I could continue. But it was still my responsibility. And if things went wrong in the home and they didn't act up to standard, that's my responsibility. So yes, it can be various people's faults within that organization, but there is somebody who is responsible ultimately for any issue.
And let me just say real quick, the same priority, Ben, real quick, the same principle applies to the Brian Ferentz situation. Mark, you and how many conversations have you and I had where we talk about the offensive line
conversation with you too, Corey?
Is directly responsible for Brian Ferentz.
Listen, let me explain it. Okay, we talked about the offensive line struggling, and people say, "Well, I fire the offensive line coach." Well, okay, they're not going to fire the offensive line coach. Then who's the responsible for the offensive line coach's performance? Brian Ferentz. All right, now Brian Ferentz isn't getting the job done. Kirk doesn't want to do anything about it. Then if you're the AD, you have to look at Kirk Ferentz. And if the AD doesn't want to do anything about Kirk Ferentz, then the president. This is how it works. I mean, you go up the chain here, the chain of command. And one
thing I want to go. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Corey. I thought I thought you. I got you. I mean, I kind of got where your point was, and I thought you were finished. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I come from a family of a lot of people, and we're used to interrupting each other.
Gotta fit it in somehow.
You're totally fine.
I was saying, back to Mark's point is Mark was talking about him being the father, and he's responsible for his kids, but to some degree because they're free moral agents. I mean, you could be the best father in the world and still have a kid that does something, that turns out to be a bad apple.
Exactly.
True. A kid. That's key right there. You're not going to have a whole tree of bad apples.
When Adrian Martinez fumbled.
If you have a whole tree, Mark, these guys are proving our point. If you have a whole tree of bad apples, then it's the tree, not the apples.
Nebraska has a player.
No, that's a good point. I'm saying I'm between.
Wasn't he on the Army or something? A guy from Nebraska's team or something. He was like 29, 30 years old. He was featured on Game Day or something like that. He used to be in the Army. I mean, that guy has a great culture. I mean, it's not like everybody on Nebraska is on playing.
I mean, to Jeffrey's point, the issue might not actually be Scott Frost. It could be a cultural issue that goes beyond, and it makes it, maybe Scott Frost wasn't the right fit. Maybe this next coach isn't going to be able to do any good there either, because maybe there's a culture there that he can't control that goes beyond.
I think they should rehire Scott,
or go beyond.
I think they ought to rehire Scott Frost.
Thank you. And basically, what I'm saying is that there's a lot of
Ferentz should stay at Iowa forever.
Eventually, he'll start winning.
Ben, your point would be more valid if they were employees who stayed at a company. But the head coach filters out the players. The players only have 4 years of eligibility, and most of them leave either by transfer or leaving early to the NFL before 4 years, but roughly 4 to 5 years per player. So they get to go into the homes and recruit the players, evaluate their character, and bring them in and decide this young man has great character and I can work with him. Or maybe he's had some issues, but I believe he's able to get past that with the right leadership.
That's why Dabo don't use the portal.
And so the coach is responsible for that. Even if there's a bad culture, when he arrives, those players are going to be filtered out. Either he's going to expedite that process, or it's just going to inherently happen by graduation and them leaving. And if he instills the right culture, the ones that are bad apples are going to leave because they aren't going to want to work and be accountable and be responsible. But so it is the responsibility, and it stops with the head coach.
I don't agree with that point. I don't agree that it stops with the head coach, because it could be the AD. What about the athletic director? What about a culture in the university?
Ben.
Mark, George,
the AD is responsible
for players, and it doesn't affect their performance.
The AD is responsible for the coaches.
Ben,
but I'm just saying there could be
the AD. Hold on, the AD has a lot more than football to look over. So if they're having issues across the landscape, this is how we got to look at this, right? Systematically. If Nebraska is having the same cultural issues in all their sports, then yeah, I'm looking at the AD. But last I checked, they don't. This is an issue with Nebraska football.
What have Nebraska done in basketball?
Didn't they just get like
what have they done in baseball?
People for a women's volleyball game yesterday or something crazy?
But Nebraska always brings people to their games. It's not an issue of people going to games.
But I'm saying, okay.
How good have they been in what sport have they won a national title in?
Nobody's claiming Nebraska basketball is good. What I'm saying is Nebraska.
Have they won a national title in? What sport? Tell me a sport.
Ben,
listen.
Ben, let me make this very simple.
How can I just get cut off? So, Mark?
Ben, let me make this very simple. The coach at a major college football program at the stature of a Nebraska has every resource available to them, and they get to run that football program with complete autonomy, as long as they're abiding by NCAA rules and the rules of the university. That is their baby. They run that program.
But I'm going to say this about Nebraska. They have not been, we talked about this earlier, Mark. Nebraska has not been the same program since they left the Big 12. They're not getting the same kids that they used to get. They don't get the Texas kids anymore. That's the biggest thing. They don't get the 5-star, 4-star Texas kids as they used to.
Talent makes a difference. I mean, Georgia, like I'm saying, has off the field issues every single year, and yet they're still winning titles. A player and the way he is doesn't necessarily make it, if he has stuff going on off the field, affects his play. A guy fumbling the football just means he's not good enough. He makes mistakes. And I understand that you're saying that the coach is responsible, but how can you make the player play better? Sometimes
I guess what I'm just trying to understand, Jeffrey, and I'm really not trying to rip you. I'm just trying to figure out why every time I explain this, you keep coming back to the same point. This isn't a matter of one player. This is a matter of continued. This is a pattern of behavior amongst multiple people. And once you have a number of people that are all doing stupid things over the course of several years, different teams, all right, different settings, different places, different times, then what is the common denominator? It's not the individual. I mean, yes, you're right. You can't. There are going to be situations where, you like Mark said, you lead a kid, you lead a horse to water, and he takes a dump instead.
Can't make them drink.
At the same time, more often than not, you play the odds, right? That's kind of the way life goes. So I'm just saying.
By that same logic, Corey, if you have multiple coaches that are having the same problem, then maybe it's not the coaches. I mean,
that's true. If you have multiple coaches that are having the same problem, what multiple coaches? What multiple coaches have had the same problem?
Well, so far, the last 3, because we just witnessed it for the first time tonight with the new coach.
What are you talking about? Bo Pelini won 9 games like every year he was there. What are you talking about?
What I'm saying is that a team is good if either the coach is so elite and he's got underrated players that play hard for that guy, like Whittingham at Utah, or you've got Georgia, and it don't matter who it is, it doesn't matter how they act off the field. They're so talented, and they play, and he gets them out on the field, and they play. Versus other programs where it's a mix of the two. Nebraska's nowhere near as talented as Georgia, and they're arguably at times, maybe not now, but have at times in the past they've struggled, have more talent than Utah, but they're losing. It's because there's something wrong there. And you're saying it's the coach. It can be, but it could also be the players as well. It could be.
I think things are a little different.
The job
yeah, and I think things.
I think you would have to have horrible luck to recruit and have a roster of 105 players over the course of 5 years. So you probably have 250 players go through your program, and you've done a horrible job of selecting those players that they all do the wrong thing based on them.
Again, who recruits the players, Jeffrey? Yeah. And it's not like NFL. Who's recruiting those players? Who's bringing the bad eggs in? Even if they are bad eggs, bad apples, who's bringing them in? Who's the one who's giving them a scholarship?
Smart has brought in players that have had off the field issues.
Not 105 of them. Not 105.
They've had like 40 DUIs in the last 3 years, and they're winning titles.
Thing.
It's not the point.
I don't know if the coach not has as much. I think at one time the coaches, like back in the 80s and stuff like that, I think the coaches had complete power. Now in the 2023s, if you say the wrong verb or the wrong pronoun, you're getting fired for stuff. So your control is different. And I think if you look at it, and maybe Nebraska has issues there, or maybe there's faculty issues that's making culture different. The coach can't get rid of faculty.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm not saying. I'm just saying it's possible.
I think we're on the same page. We're being very specific in regards to targeting the responsibility. You guys are using this term culture, and you've pinned it on ADs, and you've pinned it on faculty.
I'm talking the whole. When I say culture, it could be the whole
water. What's in the water? Where is that? Where's that going on?
The whole university could be culture. I don't just call the football team.
It's the town. It's the state of Nebraska, right? It's the governor. No, it's the governor.
I'm just saying. I mean, you have a university. Their culture could be different. I mean, even the whole athletic. I mean, I haven't seen Nebraska winning a lot in any other sport to say that, which they have been a powerhouse.
Well, I think wait a minute, hold on. I think they're pretty good in wrestling. I think they're pretty good. They're pretty darn good in women's volleyball, even I know it's not a major revenue sport.
The whole conference.
They've got a good baseball team. They've got a good baseball program. They've got a good athletic department in general.
Saying Jeffrey makes a good point. I mean, it might not be 100% right, but you might not be 100% right either, Corey.
All I'm saying is to reel this back down, because you both make great points. All I'm saying is it's not always the coach. It's not always the players. That's all I'm saying. Kirby Smart, Jimbo Fisher, Scott Frost, they're all different. They're all in different circumstances, and they all get different results. It's not always the coach, not always the players. Somewhere in the middle.
Dave, can you give us the Minnesota fight song real quick?
Okay. Finally, ready? Talk about the actual Gophers the whole entire time. Not how much
I wanted to talk about the Florida game.
For the last, I don't know how long.
Yeah. What was everybody's take on Bryson Barnes from Utah?
Hold on a second, Jackson. We got to get the Minnesota fight song in first.
Okay.
I'm going to do the Minnesota fight song, and then I'm out of here. All right?
Thank you, Dave.
Minnesota, hats off to thee. True thy colors we shall ever be. We're firm and strong and united are we. Rah, 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 rah. Sky-Yuma, hats off to you of them. Minnesota, hats off to thee. True thy colors we shall ever be. We're firm and strong and united are we. Rah, 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 rah. Sky-Yuma, hats off to you of them.
You're watching the voice of college football.
S-O-T-A. Minnesota, Yay, Gophers. Raw. All right, I'm out of here.
Roll that boat.
I'll watch the rest of the show and watch you guys complain about how Nebraska's freaking culture is hill. And I'm sick of the word culture because my coach basically says that every goddamn time.
I've never actually said the word culture one time since I'm on here until now because you just
Thanks,
said it.
Dave.
All right, I'll talk to you
Dave.
later.
Appreciate it, man. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why Nebraska can't win. They don't have a cool fight song like that. That's what they need to bring them all together.
Yeah,
bring
that's
them the right
be what
culture.
It is. I mean, that Utah game, to answer your question, Bryson Barnes, he was good. I mean, Nate Johnson as well. I like, his running ability. Florida couldn't get out of their own way. They kept making mistakes, and they kept trying to run the ball for some reason on that tough defense. They needed to throw more. I don't really know. I mean,
throw more. They threw 44 passes.
I saw a lot of running in the game.
Yeah,
to be fair, I only
20
saw
times.
the second
it looks
half.
To me, just looking at the box score, I didn't watch the game, but it looks like they should have committed themselves to a running game a little bit. Especially
fair,
with
I didn't see the second half. I only saw the first half, and when I was watching, they were running the ball and they kept getting stuffed every time. So sorry about that inaccuracy, but I was watching the Nebraska game the second half because the game was over.
Well, you don't need to apologize, Jeffrey. I'm just saying their running backs only ran the ball 13 times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I went over the stats of Graham Mertz. He had 31 of 44 completions, 331 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But the thing that I really thought about the most was that he got sacked 5 times. I'm going to tell you right now, Florida's O-line needs to get better. Oof. It's looking like a disaster. They got a long year ahead of them.
Most likely.
I'm going to log off, Mark, but can anybody on the panel here remind me of what kind of poison Harvey Updike Jr. used on the Auburn trees?
Oh, man.
If you can, I can be sure to refresh your memory. I just wanted to see if anybody
sure you
remembers.
can, but for a guy that never mentions the SEC in any conversations unless it's brought up, I don't know how that resonated so much with you.
He put Spike 80 DF in him.
Oh, man.
Got to add that in every time. This is all about Jackson. Give me a roll tide, Jackson, before I leave the show.
I'll give you roll tide, boy, man.
All right, Mark. You got anything else for me at 12:30 in the morning?
I don't believe so. I don't know what I have left.
I think Mark can take another hour of you, man. Trust me.
I got one thing for you, Corey. What's your final score prediction for Iowa, Utah State?
That's a good question. I got my score prediction dropping tomorrow morning. I really haven't given it much of any thought. I would probably say in somewhere in the range of like 31-14, 31-10.
Okay.
Wow.
I think they can get to 31.
I will update my prediction record at 5-0 on the season, 5-0 against the spread.
You are right now?
Yes.
Wow. How about that?
Took Nebraska in 7.5, took Utah to cover 4.5, and took UConn plus the 14.5, and then was 2-0 with Notre Dame and USC last week.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
that's a good start.
Good start. Yeah, it's just a start.
Yeah, I do think if Iowa scores 31 points against Utah State, that'll be quite an upgrade over scoring 7 points in their season opener against an FCS team last year. So I think they get that done. I don't know if you guys are aware. I'm guessing it's going to be pretty hot all across the Midwest on Saturday, but it gets it's not that hot here now. Like I'm sure it wasn't that hot up in Minneapolis tonight. It's going to be 95, sunny and humid on game day in Iowa City on Saturday. That is really hot, especially when you're wearing black uniforms and pads and everything, artificial turf.
Corey, how are you going to implement and we got to catch up on some super chats. My apologies, everyone. How are you going to implement the 25 point per game total and keep track of that?
Glad you brought that up because that's one thing on my, I'm still looking to nail down a sponsor for that.
Yeah.
My plan is to have a Brian Ferentz points per game tracker up in the corner in place of my logo. So yeah, I got it. I've been actually, and I mean this is going to sound really cliche and almost corporate based, Mark. I have been in I have been in conversations with potential suiters
yes.
for the Brian Ferentz points per game tracker.
That is
I
beautiful.
actually had one client in the Iowa City area that I was talking with regarding sponsorship for that throughout the season. And their concern was they thought it was maybe a potential for a negative marketing thing. And I had to explain to them, I'm like, I just want you to realize basically every Iowa fan I've ever talked to has united behind the ridiculousness of that contract.
Yes.
So like, I think it's great branding, but it's just someone who's, it's got to be somebody that's willing to go out there and kind of go out on a limb with a different type of a campaign.
If only that standard would have been put in place last year and they would have scored the 7 points in the first game, I would love to have seen them in the hole by 18 points to start the season, just to put a little pressure on.
Well, they might not. I mean, they may not get to 25 tomorrow. I mean, or on Saturday. They should against that Utah State team, but at the same time, like I said, I don't know. I wish we had a physical therapist or a trainer or someone who could kind of. I'm curious as to that quad injury that Cade's dealing with, how playing in that extreme heat, if that does anything for a soft tissue injury like that, or if that's irrelevant. I mean, I could see them being really cautious with him, and they may just run the football. And now with this new first down rule that, where the clock doesn't stop, I mean, they may not. That game's going to go by pretty fast if Iowa can run the ball effectively.
Kirk will blame that.
What's that?
Maybe Kirk will blame the new rule.
Yeah, if they don't make the 25 points per game, they'll have to take that into account.
Since Iowa runs such high,
and Iowa made that contract before that rule was in place.
Yeah,
that's true. Hey Corey, I got a suggestion for you. I'm gonna even though you gave man Jeffrey a hard time. No, I'm gonna give you a suggestion about your ad campaign pitch. Use all the like different like beer commercials that use like a negative. Any of them that use a negative. I can't think of anything offhand, but use like a negative thing and made a joke out of it to make it a positive ad campaign. Find a good example of one of those.
You're going to have to give me an example.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of one, but they used to do it all the time, and they're just not super negative, but that'd be, they used to do little inside jokes like, that when they even do it with some of the Heisman stuff a little bit. Some of the like the Pepper Hyman stuff, that kind of stuff.
The
Dr. Pepper cup and stuff like that.
I'll tell you what I had in as far as a vision, and sometimes Mark, you probably know my visions don't always pan out, and I don't know if how StreamYard supports this, but certainly you could do it with if you again. It'd be hard if you had a use the backdrop or whatever you call the gray thing in the background here. But if you utilize the logo, my vision was to have a little cutout of Brian Ferentz with an updated, an ongoing tracker, a PPG tracker that basically was either visually sponsored or verbally sponsored by whoever. You don't think a little picture of Bri up in the corner, Mark, would you don't think that'd catch people's attention? I think it would.
and you get two of them, and when they score over 25, he's got a smile on his face, and when they score under 25, he's got a big frown.
Or you can mark the whole season in smiley face Brian Ferentz.
Now, let me clarify something, Mark. I just want to make this clear. The points per, maybe you understand, the points per game tracker would be a rolling tracker. So it would not be a matter of, they scored over 25 this week or below or less than 25 this week. It's how does what they scored this week affect their average for the year?
Sure.
So they may, they score 40 against Utah State. They may slowly creep back to 25, but always above 25. So
sure.
I just don't know. Would there be any? I don't think. No, I'm not going to go there.
I'm going to keep track of what the scoring average should be, meaning the offensive scoring average. I'm going to be taking away special teams and defensive points off total.
Great point.
With the way Minnesota,
you're really handcuffing them now.
How many turnovers were there in that game tonight?
I think it was 4-1 Nebraska.
So 5. I mean, think about that. 5. Now it's the season opening game. 5 turnovers. And these are 2 Big Ten teams. Excuse me. I just wonder how many turnovers will we see on Saturday?
Oh man.
If this game between Minnesota and Nebraska is indicative of the Big Ten West, which that looked like a classic Big Ten West game, and Brian's in trouble. They're going to be playing 13-10 games every week.
Yeah.
Can I make
what game do you have the? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was waiting because it was at 1:30 a.m. Someone said to me in the chat, your boy Martinez left Nebraska, came to Kansas State, where absurdly so coaching and culture. Okay. Adrian Martinez got benched at Kansas State, so I don't see how he was super successful.
So let me just say real quick, Jeffrey, I wish you hadn't brought that up, because whoever it was in the chat that brought that up, I absolutely agree with them. I'm sorry, Jeffrey, but that's absolutely, you just helped prove the point. He went to Kansas State and looked like a new man at Kansas State.
Benched.
You're just sour because Michael Penix did the same thing. So just,
that's different. Indiana's offensive line was bad, and Tom Allen, I give, discredit to on that. He should have fired the offensive line coach a lot sooner. Penix will still be there. I'm just saying that Martinez got benched at Kansas State.
Well, I think we'd have to work through every game he got hurt.
Yeah, he was.
I'm sorry, Indiana and Nebraska are 2 different programs when it comes to football too.
Pretty similar results.
Martinez successful though if he got benched at Kansas State.
By the way, Ben, Indiana and Nebraska have been pretty comparable as far as wins and losses over the past 10 years. So
I meant like over the last 100 years, Nebraska's been over the last blue chip. They're blue chip. Where we're talking Indiana about, really isn't. I'm just talking about blue. They're a blue chip program.
You're comparing them over the last 100 years.
I'm just saying their recruiting should still be, dwarf Indiana's, and there's a lot of different dynamics. They're 2 different programs.
Last 100 years. Okay, Chris. Thanks, Chris. You want to talk about 1984?
They're saying that Martinez was injured. I'm just saying that he didn't play.
I'm saying Tom Allen has more excuses to fail at Indiana than anybody does at Nebraska. I was helping your point.
Well, you're right on that. I mean, I'm not saying anything, but the point is that I'm just saying that the point was that it's not always the coach, not always the players. Adrian Martinez is not my boy. He's nothing. He's just a quarterback that made a lot of mistakes, and he's still making mistakes. He's in the NFL right now in the preseason throwing picks. He's not better. He's still the same guy.
Wow. Hey, Jeffrey might be the biggest Nebraska apologist. The biggest Nebraska coaching apologist that I've ever come across.
I never defended Frost. I'm saying that it's not all his fault. It's a lot of his fault, but not all of it.
I will say this, that if we look at any successful college football coach that had a quarterback that was struggling, either one of 2 things happened during that quarterback stay. Either they improved or they got replaced. They didn't continue to play and suck for 4 years.
Did you say successful? Oh, you said successful. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I missed that part. Sorry.
It would be hard for you to find too many examples, period, of quarterbacks who quarterbacked programs for 4 years unsuccessfully and kept their jobs or improved. One of the 2 typically happens.
I'm just wondering what you measured success, though.
Give me an example of a quarterback who was at a university for 4 years and started and won like 30% of his games.
I was going to say, if you were going to say a quarterback who was there for several years and sucked, I could just bring up Spencer Petras, but they actually won a lot of games.
Yeah, they won games.
According to Jeffrey, it's got nothing to do with culture. It's just a lot of really rotten fruit.
I didn't say that. I said why is this happening again? I didn't say that. I said that it's sometimes the coach and it's sometimes the players. It can be either or. That's what I'm saying. I mean, we're like DJ. If DJ's really good at Oregon State, he was good at Clemson those 2 games, and then he struggled last year. It's not culture with DJ, Clemson's culture is good.
But that's one. But that's one player. That's one player.
I get it. See, it doesn't matter how many examples I use because you're going to say that it's just that one player. When I referenced one play with Martinez fumbling a game, you said that wasn't good because it was a trend. I'm just
because it was a part of a bigger thing. Why, Mark? Why? Where's the divide here? Where is the divide? Why is this so hard?
The problem is the big problem is that they're telling us that we're wrong, but they're not giving us a valid reason, a counterpoint, a counter reason. It's just
I have no counter reason
that's happening at the university.
Oh, okay. You're talking about. I think my counter reason's fair. Because I think that I'm saying that, Corey, you're right, but I'm also saying that it's not always correct.
Oh, we did give you a counter reason on this. I mean, we brought. I can't believe we're
circling. It's
I can't believe exactly.
It's the AD. It's the.
It could, but Mark, this is
what
you can't forget. The
fair
water
point.
Boy.
No,
it's fair point.
Points.
You don't think outside
anything.
You don't think
you. Yeah, but you didn't say. Listen.
Okay, let me clarify that.
No. Hang on. Just let me clarify myself here. It's not like you said, okay, it might be the AD because X, Y, and Z happened. It could be this because A, B, and C happened. You just, it could be the AD, could be the water, could be the faculty, could be this. But then you never did not provide any possible reasons or substantiate that claim.
Because I have no inner knowledge
exactly
no inner knowledge of this, but I don't have any inner knowledge of any program. So like this, you can say that about when you sit and you make you say a coach made a bad call, you don't know the inner knowledge of what he knew about his players and people's health and things.
We never said a coach made a bad call. I'm just saying
that's an example.
It's like Ole Miss with
you don't know. So how is it different?
It's almost like certain people believe that all the coaches do on game day is all they do is they show up on game day and make a few play calls. It's literally like that's what certain people believe. That's all that coaches do. They just come up there and they call a play.
That's their only
responsibility.
This is what I'm going to use for my solid basis.
Those football coaches have more control over that football team than any other leader of any organization I can think of.
Lane Kiffin, when he did that 2-point conversion, that play specifically, a lot of people said that Lane Kiffin didn't know what he was doing. The play was good. The timeout was bad. They shouldn't call it timeout, but the play was good. It just didn't work because the quarterback threw the ball too soon. If you waited one more second.
And that happened one time.
Okay.
They didn't do that every game and lose by one score every game for 5 years.
I know, but that particular fumble by Martinez in the Michigan game, how is it from
I will tell you that I was on practice fields at 3 major schools for 7 consecutive years, almost every day in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. And those coaches at places like Alabama, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, 3 SEC schools, those coaches they've got all the resources, and it's magnified even beyond that now. They have all the resources. Sure, they can't control everything. They can't control human beings, but they have responsibility over all of it. And if they're selecting the wrong athletes to come into the program, it's their fault. Now, they're not going to hit it 100%. Every coach has made a bad decision. When you recruit and sign enough players, you're going to miss, whether that's athletically the evaluation athletically or from a character standpoint, you're going to miss at some point, but you should be able to hit it like 90+% of the time.
Well, Martinez, when he went to Kansas State, Martinez had Deuce Vaughn next to him, one of the best running backs in the sport. Whereas at Nebraska, the running backs were great. And then you talk about the O-line, the ball going over his head didn't happen at Kansas State. And I know, Corey, you're going to say that is because of Frost, because he brought those players in, and it's his fault. But again, it's to me, it's like 75-25. Okay. It's like partly the players, and it's like
of course it's the players. They're the ones who execute it, but the coach is responsible. He selects the players, he signs the players,
a lot of those
he
players
develops
from the
the
previous
players,
staff,
and he's also responsible for the scheme that they run.
Now I understand fully why Kirk has been able to get away with blaming players, blaming personnel. Now I understand it, because there are people who actually believe that, Mark. I really thought it went against common sense and logic, but now I've realized people actually understand. They actually agree with that line of reasoning.
There's some people that blame the coach every single time, and it's not the player.
You guys gonna let me defend my position at all?
When
I feel like
you want a real example, I'll give you one.
When you guys go out in public and you see a screaming toddler and a parent there that's incapable of controlling them, do you blame the toddler or do you blame the parent?
Well, let me
okay,
it's out of his control though. He's
let me bring
who's responsible for Nebraska sucking for 5 years?
Fumbling wasn't Frost.
Okay, I'm going to answer this, Mark. Just give me a second.
You're really not, but go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry. I'm just making a point. I'm sorry.
Okay, listen. A university, is it a what is it? What would you call a university? Would you call it a community?
I'd call it a university.
Yeah, but it's a type of community.
It's an organization.
It's an organization.
A community. It's a lot of things.
Yes. Okay.
All those things to a certain extent.
Within one organization, there can be disruptive influences. And in fact, outside of an organization, there can be disruptive influences.
You were talking theories. You don't know what's going on at the University of Nebraska.
It doesn't matter whether it's theories or not. I'm just saying he's saying it's possible. He doesn't know. Do you know the and this is the thing too, Mark. I mean, you're talking about when you look back when you used to do this coaching. I mean, Corey, he's in Iowa. Iowa's a different program. When you look at the programs and you see the way the coaches had control, do you think it's possible they have less control now than they did when you used to do this? Is that a possibility?
Each institution,
I'm just saying,
each football program is slightly different, yes, but there are similarities and commonalities.
So I'm just curious. If you go the reverse on this, then. So again, I brought up Kirk Ferentz because I was like the anti-Nebraska in so many ways. Like, they're not as dominant up front as people think. Nebraska's probably been more dominant under Scott Frost than people would assume. Iowa gets into a lot of close games like Nebraska, but unlike Nebraska, Iowa wins almost all of those close games up until, there were a few last year, right? That they didn't, and it took an historically bad offense to find a way to lose on the road at Illinois 9-6, etc. But my point is, so Ben, you're attributing that to what? Just what? Who do we give credit for? Who do we give credit for a repetitious reputation of winning close games over multiple seasons? Who do you credit?
You're missing what I'm getting.
No, I'm asking. Why can't you answer the question? Who do you give credit to?
I give credit to Iowa's defense because of the fact that it's legit.
Who do you give credit to? Iowa's defense. That's not a person. Who do you give credit to?
The head coach. You're talking about Iowa.
Phil Parker is a good defensive coordinator, and they've got good defensive players.
But ultimately, the head coach and Brian Ferentz. Kurt Ferentz, the way he set up.
Ultimately,
and I will agree with that.
The coaches, right? The coaches.
I agree with that.
But Kirk Ferentz hired Phil Parker, and he hired his own son. Okay, so that goes hand in hand.
No, I know, but that's not the point. I mean, you're missing where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is
You're taking guesses that have no substance behind them is what you're doing.
There is substance because it's how organizations, communities, and everything work.
No.
It's not always okay. You can get fired for doing something that is, you could, even if it's your responsibility, something could happen that's out of your control and you can get fired for it.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's not possible.
5 years and
so you're saying all Jeffrey's saying is that's possible.
That's all I'm saying.
This is basically what you're doing, Ben. If we went outside right now and we went down to the nearest corner at the traffic light and there was an accident, Corey and I would be looking at it and saying, this is apparently what happened. We didn't see it, but we can see that one car T-boned the other. We can see exactly what happened here. Okay. We can maybe get a report that the light turned red at this time, therefore they ran the light. We could get all the evidence to determine within 99% that this is what happened here. And you guys would go, no, I think a leaf fell from the sky and distracted the driver.
Mark,
and I think maybe their glasses fell off their face at the wrong time.
Mark.
Well, Mark, I hope you never judge me because
you're making me sound like Ben.
That don't exist.
You're making me sound like Ben, where I'm saying it's 1% here. What I'm saying is that because people.
I never said 1%.
I blame the baby. I'm not blaming the baby. I'm not like Jackson was saying. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is, for the 80th time, what I'm saying is that you have a coach and you've got players like Adrian Martinez fumbling that ball in that game. That Adrian Martinez is in control of his actions. He fumbled the football. The baby's not, because the baby is a baby. The parent, yes, you're right, Mark. The parent has to get the baby to calm down. But with Martinez, I mean, Frost can tell him not to fumble. He can show him how not to fumble, but it doesn't mean he's not going to not fumble. And he fumbled in that particular moment in that particular game. It cost him that game.
Bryce Young was arguably the best player in the nation, the best quarterback in the nation. That doesn't mean every play he did exactly the right thing and he never made a mistake. And when he did make a mistake, it was like, that was Nick Saban's fault. That mistake was his fault. His overall play and development was excellent. And that was Nick Saban's responsibility. Adrian Martinez never got any better for 5 years under Scott Frost.
Why does it bother you?
He needed to be replaced or he needed to be developed. One of those two things needed to happen, and that's what a good head coach does.
I don't know why.
What every head coach, we could sit here all night, and I guarantee you, none of you could come up with a successful head coach that does not deal with a quarterback in one of two ways: either develop and improve them or replace them.
Well, I don't know how. My statement is wrong, though, to say that not every single loss that Nebraska suffered under the Scott Frost tenure was not his fault. That's all that I said. I used one example that has been completely torn apart. One exact game. The onside kick was Frost's fault. It's
because Mark and Corey want things in black and white.
But see,
all the time.
But here's
gotta have proof. The proof is in the pudding, Jeffrey.
I think things in black and white too, but I also see things a bit gray.
Yeah, but there are things that we don't know. There's always information you don't have.
Of course,
I don't know anything about any of these.
So I mean, but you need to come up with valid examples of that, not just grab things out of the air. It could be that.
I didn't come up with an example of Nebraska's case because I don't know the situation fully. But I'm just saying, in general, there can be bad actors that influence. I've brought up many examples. I can tell you people that I know that got fired for doing something, for having a position in a job, and they got fired for something they had no control of. I've seen it. You've never seen that before in your life experience?
No control for 5
years. I'm not saying that for sure. I'm just saying there could have been less control than you think he had. I'm just saying, how do you know that's 100%? That's all I'm saying. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong.
In addition to all the football evidence, Corey outlined all the rumors or substantiated rumors that involved his personal life that would only make sense that impacted his decision-making and his ability to execute his job. His fault. i.e., that would be his fault. His
I've also been
responsibility.
told that he's canceled recruiting visits because he was so sloshed from the night before.
He did a bad.
I am not. I am not disagreeing. I am not disagreeing with you. I was just saying.
Why was he not a bad coach at UCF? Why was he not a bad coach at UCF?
Because maybe at that point he hadn't gone off the rails in terms of his personal life.